to come see it later.
A YouTube debut for me then.
That's right. That's right. Well, without further ado, welcome again, everybody, to another episode of Pathfinder. My name is Tommy Soares. I am the Assistant Director of the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today I have the pleasure of inviting to our program today, Christopher Daly, who is the Senior Research and Development Manager at MiraVista Diagnostics in Indianapolis, here in Indiana. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today, for doing this, for speaking to us. It's great to meet you, and it's great to know a little bit about you and about your life, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for inviting me. I'm flattered. I really enjoyed my time at Purdue. I have a soft place in my heart for it. So anything I can do to help out, just let me know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. You're going to help out a lot today. I tell you what this is all about. What we're trying to do is help scientists and developing training scientists from our different universities, obviously Purdue and anybody else who's joining the program. We want to show them different scientists that are working in different life sciences companies in Indiana, so that they could have an idea of, what's out there, what's available, what makes for a successful scientist in industry, what makes for a scientist in industry as opposed to a scientist in academia, so that they can start piecing together what this is and hopefully making connections with people like you and companies like MiraVista. It's so exciting to see MiraVista grow the way that it's growing. But please tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where did you study? And then maybe, what got you here and what got you to MiraVista?
Awesome. Well, I grew up in Indiana, not far from Purdue in Tipton County, which is kind of halfway between kind of the Noblesville area and Kokomo. It's a little farm town in the spot in the roads. So I graduated there and I went to Purdue for my undergrad. Did for chemistry. Graduated in 2004, so it's been a few years. So it was a fantastic program. It was really when I went to grad school, I realized just how good of a program Purdue really had for the undergraduates there, specifically. So that was really good. Nice. And I was kind of where probably a lot of people are now. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied to grad school. I went and visited, Berkeley and Madison and San Diego, and just didn't know whether academia was for me. And so I worked for a few years. So I got an attempt to hire job that I was planning on keeping for about a year while I made a decision. Really enjoyed it. It was with a little company called Ceradyne. They made reagents for big box clinical analyzers for anti-epileptic therapeutic drug monitoring. So anti-epileptics to titrate in the right dosages, as well as some of the more potent antibiotics like vancomycin and teicoplanin that needed to be monitored. And that's where I actually really decided I liked product development. I liked taking something and putting something out the door useful for the world. What I didn't realize is, at that time, I only had my BS. And so we had been bought by Fisher Scientific, and then Thermo bought Fisher. So it was clear that this little tiny company, as a part of that big umbrella, was probably going to be consolidated. So it was a good time for me to go back to school. So I went to the University of Illinois for a PhD in analytical chemistry, where I worked with Jonathan Sweetler on building instrumentation, applying that to model systems for neurochemistry. When I finished that, my old boss had started at a company here in Indianapolis called PTS Diagnostics, and gave me a job. So I was there for 8 years. And what they did was produce cholesterol HbA1c and glucose screening tests for large populations. So these big health screening fairs that companies and insurance companies will have, just people who aren't going to the doctor on a regular basis, they still can get some of the basics checked. So we did that for about 8 years, produced a variety of new products. Then the pandemic hit, and what happens when the pandemic is people don't gather in large quantities anymore. So that company is struggling, but they had some massive layoffs. I worked for about 6 months up at the Foundry, actually, up at Purdue in West Lafayette, with a little company called Novalytic, helping them figure out specifications for one of their instrumentations they were trying to develop.
Sure.
And then an opportunity came along here at MiraVista.
Nice. Our good friend Fred Rainier at
I
Novalytic.
worked with Fred quite a bit up there.
Awesome.
Well, I knew him from undergrad as well. But yeah, Fred and I were hammering out the specifications on some of that, on the equipment that they were trying to develop.
Awesome. And so then you jumped over to MiraVista.
Yep.
What are you doing now there? What's the day to day? What's your function?
Yeah, so it's a little bit smaller than PTS was, about a third of the size, but I run the R&D department now. So we're developing tests both for our reference lab that we have in-house, as well as developing IVDs that we can sell out of house for point of care use. And the main niche market that we're in is testing for invasive fungal infections, which is typically amongst immunocompromised populations.
Right.
A lot of times before transplant patients or something will go on immunosuppressives, they'll need to run the battery of tests to make sure there's no underlying fungal infections that they're going to not be able to suppress any longer, or preventatively give them antifungal regimens before transplant.
Cool. So that would be the main market segment here. I'm sure there's also other antifungals, but so is it mainly the transplant world that you are dealing with, or are there
That's
other
a
applications?
part of it. There's the HIV immunocompromised people too are very susceptible, as well as just general people will mold will they'll inhale it and you'll get a respiratory infection. A lot of times it goes undiagnosed because they think it's bacterial or something, or a different kind of pneumonia, and the wrong treatment's given, it still gets worse. So having those tests that you can screen for the right treatment quickly is important.
That's awesome. And is that going to be at the point of care tests, or is that going to be people sending you guys samples and you guys do the testing?
So our primary business is that we have a clinical lab on site. So we receive a few thousand samples every day, and test those here. We try to get that turnaround time to be in less than 24 hours back to the doctor.
Yeah.
And then we also have one LFA, a lateral flow device for histoplasmosis out that we sell outside the US.
Awesome.
So for those, there's really no access to that kind of testing outside of the US or other modern medical systems. And so we sell a lot to South America, a little bit to Africa, and some in the South Pacific.
Phenomenal. So it sounds to me like you've had quite a few experiences, both academic, but mainly outside of academia. How do you define success in industry as an industry scientist? And I know you've had to move around from place to place at times, but it sounds like you've kind of seen what it takes to succeed in industry. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess it partially depends on what kind of company you're in. Most of the small to mid-sized companies, which I like a little better because you can have a lot more impact to the business and work across a larger portion of the business. So I got a soft place in my heart for those. To be successful, I think the biggest thing I look for whenever I'm hiring a scientist or trying to train a scientist is it doesn't need to just work once or in theory work, and it has to perform time in and time out and be manufacturable. You've got to be able to make something useful out of it, not just get information. Learn some new science, which is cool, but you've got to be able to reproduce it consistently. So that's the biggest indicator I look for. You've had a lot of success when you can do that, which is a little bit different ask than you see in academia.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it, does it take a little bit more patience to do that, or is it you have to have some kind of a different mentality, different perspective on what you're doing? Tell us a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
it sounds, again, like it's not just your run of the mill. You have to put things to the test, right?
Yeah. It takes a lot of patience, because there's a lot more testing that has to happen, and it's not sexy testing. It's not groundbreaking. You have to run 5,000 samples to see if, all of these, whether a 0.1 difference in pH makes a difference in the outcome or stability of the product. It's, a lot of nitty gritty, fidgety bits on double checking every single parameter that you're using to produce this product to make sure that it doesn't impact the performance, so that when it comes out of manufacturing or out of wherever it's going, you can be assured that it's good. And it's a lot of double checking, triple checking on things you think should work, but every project I've ever worked on, something that should have worked didn't, and then you've got to go diving in to find out why, and sometimes it's kind of silly. I think the craziest one I've had is that we had really good response on this particular antibody that we were using, and then it stopped working. We traced it down to the type of O-ring they were using in the cryo vial. No idea why, never went past it, but we spent 6 months working on that, and that you could put that O-ring in and it worked. You switch out something else, it didn't work, and I have no clue as to why. But that's the kind of weird problems that you see when you scale stuff up on a massive level.
And I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole there, because you could put different types of rubber O-rings, or different types of sealants, or no sealant, or whatever it is, right?
And that's something you have to look out from your suppliers as well. You got to qualify and control your suppliers to make sure they're not switching stuff out on you without telling you, because it could have an impact to the product that you're trying to put out.
Right.
So yeah, there's just a lot of detail work that's needed to think about.
Totally.
Chris, and some you've got to decide when it's worth solving too. I mean, do you need to figure out the mechanism of action, or do you just need to fix it?
Right. Right. So that's good follow on to the question I was going to ask you, which is to a point that you made before. Not everybody likes to work in a huge company.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, you tend to be able to have a bigger voice, more responsibility, a better point of leadership in a smaller or medium-sized company. Does asking those questions to improve or optimize the product delivery, the scalability, the manufacturability, does that optimization, asking those questions, do they get really defined by the budget? And if it's a smaller budget on a smaller company, or is typically we have a similar budget, but you just have to be more choosy about the questions that you ask?
The answer, yeah, it is definitely a multifactorial question. Typically, it's how much risk is the company willing to bear to put the product out? I mean, how much assurance, like Roche's brand recognition is so important to them, they would never risk anything. Whereas a smaller company, the risk might be worth it. If they didn't, dot every I and cross every T, they might take the top 80% and leave the bottom 20%, to probably won't happen. So it's a trade-off. And it often comes from the risk-benefit analysis you would do during product development.
But that's a very interesting perspective that I don't necessarily think I would have taken into consideration. But you are right that reputation in the brand must be impeccable to be maintained, right? When you are a smaller company, you could take smaller risks or more risks.
Well, and it's not going to make the news either.
Right. Right, right.
So,
That makes total sense.
I mean, the
Um,
reason the pharma companies and stuff go to the nth degree, checking every last thing, and it's so rigorous is, and largely because their brand, it's Roche is a multi-billion-dollar brand. I mean,
yeah,
so,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it kind of goes into the decision making.
No, but that's very interesting. So to be a successful scientist in industry, though, it sounds to me like you have to have a lot of patience also in some of the type of experiments that you would have to do, especially if you have to test the rigor of some product that is going to go out. And that's not necessarily, I mean, we do rigor in academics, but typically you make it work a couple of times. That's good enough. Let's
Yeah,
go. We can publish the paper. I think what you were saying about, man, you really have to do 5,000 to see if the pH by 0.1 change would really be making an
yeah.
effect or not. I mean, patience. Give us what else? What would you say to somebody starting new? Listen, you need to do this to be successful.
Yeah. Don't ever assume you know it without doing the experiment. Don't ever assume it'll be fine, because those are usually the ones that come back late in the game, and you've got to go back and redesign some stuff. So
Yeah.
double check all your work.
That's good. That's good. And I mean, asking the same question, what was the best advice somebody ever gave you as you were getting started?
I don't. Oh, I've had so many good mentors over the years, both in academia and in industry. I think the one that was the best was take your weakest skill and learn it. Whatever that is, whether whatever you don't do well, fix it, because it can be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was presentations. Yeah, I all but failed my lit sim, and my graduate advisor is like, don't repeat it, just fix it. And now I give presentations all over the world. So, and still get nervous about them, but it's a skill that can be learned. The story he told me, he was terrible at math and he's actually really good at it now, but he had to work hard at it. So if there's something that maybe is a weak link in there, that was the best advice I ever got.
That's interesting because you also hear people say, oh, if you have a weakness, don't worry, just team up with somebody who can cover that weakness and you stay focused on the things that you do best. But I tend to agree with you that if you focus and try to hone in on the skills that you don't do well, you end up really changing certain habits that everything starts functioning better. Right? Like you think you're only working on that one skill, but everything just starts to, because you're developing certain habits, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I mean, you may not be the best at it, but you still got to be able to do it to some point. So having a good team around you, that complements your skill set, is also really important. That's something I've always looked for, is hire people smarter than I am.
Yes.
I always want to be the
Absolutely.
dumbest guy in the room.
No doubt, me too. I try to do my best to put myself in that situation as much as possible. But tell me, what do you know now that you didn't know when you were in academia? Is there any particular scenario that you can paint for us that you learned something, a lesson, or something that you didn't know prior to?
Yeah, I think from a career standpoint, even after, because I did work in industry before going, back to grad school. So my experience was a little different. I guess until I got back out and worked with a bunch of larger, companies and had a more diverse set of experiences, that the number of scientists that are in somewhat non-science roles in these companies, even with advanced degrees, is quite a bit. And those advanced degrees really help them in those positions, whether it's in regulatory or quality or sales and marketing. I've seen lots of people with engineering and science degrees be great sales and marketers because they can speak the language of the people they're talking to. So there's a lot of other options out there other than just R&D. That's one thing I didn't appreciate till I was a little further into my career.
So can we go a little bit deeper on that? I think that's very interesting to hear, because what we want to be able to do is to open up the world of possibilities for people who are here in Indiana and are developing their education and training in Indiana. And we want to show them, that you don't necessarily need to stay on a particular course. So what types of positions are these? Upper administration positions? Are these, decision makers? Are they also managers? How does it work, Chris?
It's really across the board. For any company that's technically oriented, there's a lot of opportunities, at the lowest level of, sales and marketing all the way to, senior management. Same thing in regulatory and quality and manufacturing. They really value the ability for someone to understand the products that they're making, and also it enables them to make better decisions. And some of the best people that I've worked with, cross-functionally have, always had a technical background, and it has served them well, and they've done really well in those careers.
What backgrounds would you say would work best for a diagnostics company like yours?
I'm biased. Analytical chemistry is what I majored in, but in the end, diagnostics, you're making a measurement, right? So that really helps to be able to understand the clinical guidelines on, how precision gets run, and, how to structure those studies, and, what it means to the patient, how to interpret the results. Also, if they're doing some of the more fundamental stuff here, one of my weaknesses is I've never taken a biochemistry class. So I lean on the people in my group that really know immunology and biochemistry, because I can talk through it, but I'm never going to have the depth of knowledge that they're going to have. So anything, I would say those are the two. If you have really good fundamentals into the basic operational pieces of the test, from a biochemistry standpoint, or from the application of the test for analytical chemistry, are two really strong backgrounds that I would look for.
And so would you recommend people to be well-rounded in those areas? And even, I would think, molecular biology, right? And biochemistry,
Yeah.
kind of together. What about on the data side of things? You need to do some good statistics and
Statistics would be one of the key pieces in there in whatever industry you're working in, because if you're making lots of stuff, you're going to collect lots of data about it, and you need to be able to look at, how much variance do you see over an entire production lot, and is that going to impact the quality of the result you're giving back to the doctor? And so, being able to handle some of those higher level statistical, methods is critical.
And what's your favorite? If you were to say, I really like doing this part, I like doing this part more than that part.
Oddly, I like the transfer to manufacturing.
Yes.
Taking it out of the lab and putting it into a process that is repeatable, reproducible, and you can do it without babysitting it, and all the work instructions that go into telling the manufacturing scientist how to do it and making it robust. That's the part I like.
Is it because you were in awe the first time you saw it, and you're like, oh my gosh, like 10,000 tests and they all work?
Yeah. It's how you got it right.
Yeah.
That's how you know the design is right, when you can go and manufacture it. And because until then, it's not useful to anyone. So
no, I like that. So there's a certain sense of fulfillment that you get in finishing that process and knowing that this is going to become a product. It's going to be out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. I can imagine. That's really exciting. If you were to say something that you miss about academia, what would that be?
Oh, something I would miss. I really don't miss the long days or the low pay. It was a grueling 5 years.
Okay, that's what you don't miss.
Yeah, that's what I don't miss. I do miss the variety of science you would get exposed to. Just being able to go sit in seminars and lectures and talks and the visiting scientists, just be able to
Yeah.
pop in and, for an hour learn something that I had no idea existed. That's the piece that I would miss is the, availability of all that. At a walk across the quad, and then you can go sit in on a seminar for an hour and take a mental break away from whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So that would be the part. In some of the high end equipment goes, most of the universities have the central services where you've got the best of everything, rather than having to spend $500,000 on a mass spec or and justify it with a budget and all that. So those are the two things that I would like to have back.
We struggle to get those, but we are quite fortunate that we can have quite a few of those instruments.
Yeah.
They're so powerful.
Yeah.
And some of the newer ones are incredible.
Yeah.
Hybrid mass specs and things that they're doing in proteomics is crazy stuff. Stuff. What would you say is something that you would miss the most if you were not working in industry?
If I wasn't working in industry, I'm going back to being able to make products that people use.
Okay.
Yeah. I would miss not producing something that was going to a clinical lab where they could, go run a test and give someone a result. So
awesome. I mean, that's fair enough, right? That's completion. That's seeing it through, right? What keeps you in Indiana? I know you grew up in Indiana. Is it family? Is it your roots?
It's a little bit of my family. My parents are older. Also, the cost of living is really cheap compared to most of the biotech areas. I got offered to move out to the PTS had acquired a part of Bear and Bear out in Sunnyvale, California, which is kind of the heart of Silicon Valley. They offered to move me out there, but the amount of salary I would need to live the same life was not in the budget.
Right.
So I think, you can afford to live and there's plenty of opportunities for jobs. Those are the reasons I've stuck around.
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like you're doing really exciting, cutting edge work at MiraVista, and you're helping a lot of people with these tests. I can imagine, the community of immunodeficient patients that are benefiting so much from these particular tests. What would be your advice to somebody who is getting started, or somebody who is getting started with looking for jobs in industry? How should they go about it? Because, there's so many places to look. There's so many browsers to pick. There's so many companies. There's so many different types of positions. How do you start?
Oh, that's a hard one. I will say the labor market is very different now than when I was ever looking for a job.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit tighter, and I think the employees have certainly a pretty good chance of being able to kind of decide what they want to do. I would work with a recruiter. I've found better luck with the recruiters, and because a lot of these big companies, especially the big companies, it's so hard to get your resume in through their automated system that just kicks everything out for whatever reason. Make calls, LinkedIn with the HR people at the companies and send them directly your resume. because those automated systems just are awful. And user, I think I read something like 60% of jobs are filled by contacts. So reach out to your contacts. Having that personal in, and we were just looking at MiraVista. The last person that was hired here who didn't already know someone was like 2 years ago or something. I don't know. Maybe it was only about a year ago. I think it was just that a year ago. It was the one before me. But everyone else has known at least someone who worked here. So and I've seen that a lot.
Well, I know a few people that work there. So if you guys end up hiring anybody from Purdue, we can say that they at least knew you and I knew each other and a few of the other people at MiraVista.
Awesome.
I think, you know, the opportunities are there if they look, and I really like your answer about go search your network, go talk to your people. And you know, if you were looking for a new scientist to hire, what would you be looking for in your interview with them? What types of characteristics are you looking for in a new scientist?
Well, definitely would have to, number one, in any group, and I think it's a little more important in industry than maybe even in academia, is to be able to work as a team. It's not going to be a single person on a single project making progress. It's going to be 4 or 5 people working on different aspects, and you know, maybe one person pulling it all together. And so I would say that you know, that collaboration and teamwork and that personality fit almost trumps skill set, because I can teach a lot of skills. It's hard to teach the other. So some of those are, and then of course, you know, do they, you know, have the right background, technical background to, you know, be able to hit the ground running. So yeah, those are the 2 things that I would look for initially.
And you know, the technical background, obviously they would get training if you would hire them, right?
Yeah.
They're already there. So the technical background needs to be specific, or it needs to be fairly broad. Like, do you want somebody who has more biochemistry than you, for example, to kind of help out in that regard? Or you know, how or a broad sense of, you know, analytical chemistry and
yeah, I guess it really depends on, you know, the slate of projects for the next few years, on, you know, what skill set might you be deficient in to, you know, be successful. I mean, one of the critical things we do here is culturing, you know, the fungus. So any of that culturing experience is always good, because not a lot of people have it. And it is fundamental to making our products. You know, when I was at PTS, we had invested significantly in R&D, and they couldn't decide what products were going to be on the list for the next several years, but I still had to hire. So I hired an analytical chemist, a biochemist, an electrochemist, all those, you know, about 4 or 5 key disciplines that I was going to be able to use. And if I wasn't going to use them, I could train them in other stuff. So at least I had the slate there to kind of fill in as those very versatile, you know, projects came through. So I think I always lean for more of a broad experience than narrow, because, you know, things change in industry and projects and priorities change. So you want to be able to be flexible.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, we've heard also from previous conversations that we've had on the Pathfinder program that you know, it's good to have not only this team mentality, but also to have some of the project management skill set that you do get. And you know, maybe I think it's important to reiterate this to the grad students that are watching this program, is that you know, you are gaining a lot of project management experience just in your project, and you're, you know, you're training undergrads and they're helping you with the project, and you're planning the day-to-day experiments, and you're planning your week, and you're planning your month, and so on and so forth. How much of that do you look for in candidates, at least during the interview when they're talking to you?
Yeah, I always ask, you know, in the interview, what, you know, how they would tackle a project. And that, say, give them a scenario of, if you had a project you didn't know anything about, how would you start breaking it down? And that gives me kind of an idea, or give them examples of when they had to, do something like that. And that'll give me an insight into, how much project management can they do to figure out how to take something to fruition. I've seen lots and lots of scientists who get it halfway there, but really pushing it to completion it's art.
Yeah.
Because the further you get in the project, the harder it gets to get it to the finish line.
Right. There's so many tangents that you can take, right?
Yeah,
as you said
there
before.
is.
And so is it important to have that skill set? Would you recommend that anybody take a project management course or something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely. It's something that we haven't done here yet, but it's still early days. I think everyone in just a general life could use project management. Just for anything you do is, how do you make a schedule and, break down it into its component parts and figure all that out to most efficiently get it done.
Totally.
So yeah, I think it would show a lot of initiative as well.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit, Chris, as you are thinking about new products that you want MiraVista to start going after, to start making, or even, planning on, how do you decide what is that next product, or how do you decide what is that next step that we need to take in the idea phase to start to bring it to some kind of a project, right?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. I think everywhere I've been, it's always been a struggle to figure out what the next thing is.
Yes.
I think the key is to make sure it's not, the customer rarely knows exactly what they want. If the sales guy tells you, hey, I can sell this, you'll be a little skeptical of it. I like to go to the customer, watch what they do, how are they working, where are their needs, interview them, because they're rarely going to be aware of exactly what it is. And even one of the critical things for project management and product development is requirements management, is to define what the thing needs to do and accomplish well before you go into the design, or you're just going to be stuck in this little loop at the beginning, refining the design versus being able to design it well from the beginning. So I think talking to the customers is key. Go to where the product's being used currently and figure out what the needs is, and you'll find something. Key opinion leaders are also good. They're going to know what the broad industry needs are. Maybe not the day-to-day kind of details, but kind of the larger scope. They might be able to tell you where the trends are and how they see in their pain points.
Mm-hmm. And so customer discovery, it sounds like the first part that you were talking about, calling people, talking to them, asking them, what do you need? Is it this? Is it that? Where do you need this, right? Do we really need that, or do we need this? There's a lot that we learn in that phase, right? That we think we have a solution for a particular problem, but once you go talk to 100 people, you're like, well, I kind of changed my mind.
Yep, that happens all the time.
So do you guys do that in MiraVista? Are you able to do some, customer discovery type
We do.
calls?
In fact, right now we have a scientific advisory board, and we'll get them on the line, and we have slews questions that we ask them, and
Nice.
just from a kind of high level. We also have contacts in the industry. Most companies have, as they call, friendly customers, where you'll probably be able to get a more in-depth response about the day-to-day, and they're open to. Most customers are really open to new product ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's certainly something that's available to us.
That's awesome, and it must be exciting too, also to learn what is the need and how to develop something to meet that gap, right?
And go experience the product too. I mean, go to where it's being used and use it, and then you'll have a much better idea of what you need to make.
Yeah. Awesome. Is it important to have a little bit of knowledge about that process as you are a scientist, let's say, starting to get into industry, or do you think you develop that as you go? It's not, it's stay focused on the science first.
Yeah, that's something that, I mean, it comes with time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know if there would be too many opportunities to do it before you're in industry. It'd be a little challenging environment to find.
Yeah,
But yeah, I guess from
yeah,
an engineering standpoint, there's a lot of user design and user experience type courses that are out there. But I think that might get you part of the way. But I think the experience of actually doing it would be more valuable.
sure, sure. Talk to me about internships. Should students seek out internships in companies, and how does it work if you're a postdoc, for example? Are there internships for postdoc level scientists as well? Do you know?
There certainly used to be, particularly at the larger companies,
Mhm.
because it's more research based than it is product development. So the Roches and Lillys of the world will do something like that.
Mhm.
But for the smaller companies, it's not usually. We'll do undergrad internships, but for you know, um, they typically don't do advanced level internships.
Gotcha.
They're
Gotcha.
usually looking to hire for someone to be there for quite some time. Most of the postdoc internships are fixed duration, and your
Yeah.
typical product development is going to be in the 3 to 5 year time frame
Mhm.
for an IVD or for an in vitro device.
And so, it's if you were to say that, if you're going to do a postdoc in industry, plan on it being at least that long if you want to see something
Yeah,
come to
well,
fruition.
like the Roaches and Lilies will do basic research. So a lot of their postdocs are, I think, basic, if I remember right, they were 2 to 3 year, durations.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But
Um, I want to thank you so much for answering all my questions, and I want to give an opportunity to anybody online if anybody else has questions here. You can post them on the chat,
yeah.
or you can unmute and speak your mind.
While we get those questions, I'm going to relocate or my laptop is going to die.
Oh,
I got caught up in a
okay,
conference room in time, so I will be back in just a minute. Let me run downstairs.
okay. So just wanted to let everybody know that you're free to um, eh, just unmute yourself and join the conversation and ask Chris any questions you want. I think he sounds like somebody willing to give us some answers to the questions we have. So if you are tuning in next week, we are going to be hosting next Thursday, the 30th of June, Anand Hindupur, principal scientist, molecular diagnostics, also from MiraVista. Here is Chris back. Thank you again.
All
Sorry we caught you by surprise.
right. No, it was I was finishing up a meeting and didn't get back down, and my laptop had 5% left.
Quick thinking, quick thinking. But thank you, Chris. This has been wonderful. Any other piece of advice or words of wisdom that you want to share with us before we end our conversation with you today?
Let me think. That was kind of a half-formed thought. You were talking about what does success look like,
Yeah,
and success isn't necessarily entirely your career. I mean, that's a piece of it, but it yeah, make sure you make room in your life for other things.
sure. Sure.
I traveled for a job about 50% of the time for a couple years, and that was not a good time. You like it, but yeah, sometimes chasing that next step is just keep the whole of your life in perspective when you're looking at what to do next.
Totally. And I mean, with that though, like, do you regret or having that experience, trying that job, trying that experience, even though now you reflect on it and you're like, that was difficult time in my life?
Give me a couple years, I'll let you know.
Yeah. It's
I
still a
definitely
little
learned a
bit,
lot.
it's still a little raw.
Yeah,
I
every
can
other week out
imagine.
to California and that 4 hours there and 4 hours back, and it was a lot
Geez.
of time. It was a lot of time away. Um,
Yeah.
I would do it at maybe 25%.
Yeah.
The amount I was doing was a little unsustainable,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Sometimes we can choose, sometimes we can't
that's
choose,
true.
right? So,
Well, I did
so
choose
I
that
mean,
one, so I don't want to blame myself, but
yeah. But I mean, again, I think it's wise words of advice. Open your eyes, make sure you know what you're getting into. I mean, and isn't that something that you should really understand from the get-go in an interview is, what is this entail and
yeah,
what's going to entail my success in this
yeah.
job?
So yeah, and I honestly, just being really honest, I think the pandemic changed my perspective on a lot of stuff a little bit. Like it has a lot of people that
Yes.
chasing that was probably, I don't know. There's other things,
Sure.
but enjoy your
And
job, enjoy your life, and make sure to balance them both.
definitely. And I guess, rightly so, the question was more defining success in as a scientist in industry, right?
Yeah,
But I do agree. I mean, you have to have a good balance, and pick the right channel for you. The other lesson that I'm learning from what you're saying is that, hey, if you don't like it, don't do it anymore. Go find something else to
yeah.
do because
There's the
other.
job market's quite hot out there, so
That's right.
um,
That's right.
never
It's
undervalue yourself either.
That's right. That's right. That's great. Because you're adaptable, you're moldable, you can, be flexible as well, right? Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Um, and wishing you much success at MiraVista, wishing your products much success in the market.
Awesome. Yes, and congrats to all the hopefully I think closely graduated grad students.
Yes.
Are they towards their end or
We have grad students from all over. I
all
mean,
over? Okay.
and yeah, and there are even, to my surprise, we've even had some faculty that join the program too, and they watch, and
Oh,
it's
cool.
great.
That's
Yeah,
really
very, very cool. And
yeah.
it's having, I think, a good ripple effect. It's a good thing what we're doing, and I want to thank you for doing it and
Anytime.
and helping us out.
Anytime. And you have my contact information. If anyone has any other questions or anything like that, just let me know, and I'll be happy to answer for email or phone or whatnot.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to provide it. They'll be able to get that contact info through me or through Robin Benson, our administrative research coordinator. Um, Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again for another Pathfinder program. And stay tuned next week, same channel, same hour at 3:30. We'll be interviewing another scientist from MiraVista, and then Hindupur, and looking forward also to that conversation. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
You too.
Thanks. All the best.